So I recently had a conversation with a CFO, a chief financial officer, at a Fortune 100 company, but it could have been any manager who's got any profit and loss responsibility, and they're going to ask the following question. They're going to want to know, they're going to need to know, what's the return on my investment if you work with this newly promoted manager or this high potential? We've identified them as a high potential, but they're a director and above, and they need to work with an external consultant. What's the value, what's the ROI in particular of executive coaching at an organizational level? Well, let's assume that an organization is 2 or more people. Let's make it, 50 or more people, and they've got a little bit of money that they're going to invest in somebody. And let's assume that that organization is mature enough that they've got some kind of evaluation that says, for instance, coaching others is a measure of that manager's career. It's a good thing. How do we do our work? Well, by definition, managers maximize the productivity of others. Well, what do I mean specifically? That means that, let's say, 20% of that manager's compensation is tied to that one thing, their capacity to coach others. So let's imagine my name is George and I've got 10 direct reports because I'm stretched. And for all of those 10 good people, maybe, the capacity to steer their careers, guide them, inform them, make them as productive as possible is a measure of my impact as a manager. Reasonable assumption. Well, let's further imagine that you've got a big company like that first example I mentioned, and maybe that VP or above's comp is somewhere around their annual compensation around $300,000. And let's imagine that 20% of their comp is tied to that skill, their capacity to coach others. That means, mathematically, that 20% of $300,000 is $60,000. It's variable compensation that goes to the VP if they're masterful at developing others. So then I can turn back to that CFO and I can say, well, what percent of that $60,000 per year do you want your senior managers to maximize? Because if they do, for instance, get 100% of the 60K, that investment is tremendous for you. And anything less than 60,000 is a positive return on investment. If, for instance, I charge 20,000 a year to work with that one VP or senior VP, there's a net gain for that 1 year of 40K. And what is it over time? If they're there for 5 more years, you've retained a desired employee, not just every employee, but that one great VP. And they provided massive value, not only to their directs, but it cascades down. So, what's the return on investment? In your organization, maybe you've got 10 people. Maybe you've got 100 people. Maybe you've got 1,000 people, like most businesses. You might be thinking, these numbers are too big. They're not. If, for instance, you were to invest $20,000 per year in your top directors, what would be the return on investment? If 20% of their comp is tied to their capacity to coach other people, it's pretty easy math. If their comp is $150,000, 20% of $150,000, do the math. And if you're confused, call me up. Let me know. There's absolutely no reason why you can't quantify the return on investment of your consulting or coaching. Unless, of course, you choose to be ignorant, but I wouldn't assume that anybody watching this video would want to be ignorant. It's like going to the doctor and not caring about the outcome. You invest in your financial planner's wisdom or your physician's because there are protocols that you think are going to lead to a certain outcome. Well, similarly, why wouldn't you do that with a leadership consulting investment? We know that there are protocols that are more efficacious, that are going to be more successful than others, so why not? Leaders practice leadership, so let's get going. Use the numbers immediately.